In the Cathedral of Trees, some of the trees have a number on them, and this is not good for them because it means they are for the chop. If not imminently, then eventually. But then, so are we. We all have a number on us, painted invisibly on our heart or brain, or what other of our favourite organs gives up the ghost first. And we never know when that will be, do we? It's one of those special autumn still and sunny afternoons that I love so much. The leaves are burnished bronze, and there's a hush all over the land. I'm going to break out into song in a moment. Who was that? The Seekers. I wonder if they found what they were looking for. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope I find what I'm looking for. When John asked me in the early days, what do I want? What do I really, really want? I was surprised that he burst out into a Spice Girls song. I didn't know he knew the lyrics to what I really, really want. And I told him I wanted to come to rest. Well, 6 or 7 years later, I've come to rest, at least physically, in the tiny house in the Derbyshire Dales with these lovely woods, these walks very close to my front door. Basically, the reason I've come for a walk on a Monday afternoon when I should be editing the next video is I can't get an internet connection on my MacBook in the tiny house for some reason this afternoon, so I'm striking out on foot while the going is good, while the weather is warm, and I think you will agree with me, this is a very sensible strategy. I can do this week's video editing later when the sun sinks, but for now I'm exploring a little bit of a new path. Yes, what do you really, really want? What does it mean to come to rest? Well, I'm going to put it really quite simply. Coming to rest is being who you are, or I might say being who you really are. It seems to me that in the first half of our life, we spend, in our society anyway, most of the time trying to be someone like somebody else. I always wanted to be like Mike English. Mike English was a graphic designer and was a dead cool guy. He always had flash cars. He had a Porsche at one time and a very nice house and a fridge full of exotic foods I'd never heard of, let alone tasted. Who here has ever heard of roll mop herring? What's that about? Anyway, his wife was a fabulous cook, and one summer Mike had got tickets for the last Richard Hadley test match at Trent Bridge, Nottingham. We were both cricket fans. And Beth, bless her, packed us off with the most amazing contents in this picnic hamper, you know, wicker picnic hamper. And when we took our seats, Mike and I, at first all eyes were on Richard Hadley, the New Zealand fast bowler. It was his last test match. But after Mike started pulling out the roll mop herrings and the game pie and the bottle of champagne, heads started to turn. And by the end of the next few overs, nobody was watching Richard Hadley. Everybody, all eyes were on Mike's hamper and what would come out next. Happy days, but I was living, I am told, my best friend told me, and it stung. She said, "You're Shanks," my friends call me Shanks. "Shanks, you're living vicariously." And I was, that's the truth. You need a friend, really, to tell you the truth sometimes, don't you? I was living through somebody else, or I was, if you like, I was a window shopper through Mike's life, thinking, oh, I'd like some of that, I'd like some of that. And so I did. And I went on a life planning and time planning course, which I paid for. And I was late at the first session, which they locked me out. I was furious. So, in this life planning or time planning weekend workshop in London, I wrote my goals down. I can't remember for how many years, possibly 5 years. Anyway, my goal was to have a glass office with green plants in a nice office in town in Sheffield. And sure enough, a year later, this is true, a year later, I moved into, I was one of the first tenants in Sheffield Science Park on Arundel Street with my computer company and my glass office and potted plants. So that worked for a while, but really, I was a copycat. That's the truth of it. And I wanted to be like Mike. Well, you can only do that for so long until you're found out. And this is the price you pay, I suppose, of following somebody else's dream, or more generally, I would say this is what happens when you are sort of, technically it's called other referential. In other words, you get your bearings from others or people around you or your culture. And heaven knows, as a 30-something young man, I was wanting to be someone, and I ended up being a copycat. So coming to rest for me, back to the plot, was really about being authentic. I know it's an overused word, but who do you really want to be? And through some shedding of skins, it was a difficult, painful transition. I left a very good marriage. I left my home of 20 years. I closed my business, my technology business in Sheffield. I squatted on my mate Andrew's sofa for a while, and then I put a backpack on my back and set off to the Camino in northern Spain for 10 days. That was the start of my travels, and my destination was Lanzarote, where I then lived for 2 years. So I'd left everything. I'd even left my country. And so I started creating, you might say, a life of my own on the island of Lanzarote, until I went to India. And when people ask me why I went to India, I say I went to India to lose myself and find myself, but I only did half a job. So when I spent some time at the Christian Benedictine monastery called Shantivanam, not a monastery, ashram, very Indian, with Sanskrit chanting in the morning. And then after that I was pointed in the direction of some geezer called Ramana Maharshi, who I'd never heard of, in Tiruvannamalai, not so far away. They said, you need to go there. Muji's in town. Well, I'd never heard of Muji either. So I was sort of parachuted into the epicenter of what I now know is called Advaita, or non-duality, which in a way was my preparatory school for when I hooked up with John Butler, when I came across his book, Wonders of Spiritual Unfoldment, in a charity book sale, raising funds for friends of mine, opening a sort of an arts and events centre in Sheffield. And this book, I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was familiar Christian terminology, and yet this Eastern mystical flavour of what I now know is called non-duality. Well, that set a cat amongst the pigeons, and my sort of old self I took myself to be sort of disappeared as I rebaptized myself in the river Ganges with mud and cow shit oozing through my toes. I washed myself down afterwards. And so I sort of, when I got back to Madrid on the way back to Lanzarote, like the Pope, I knelt and kissed the tarmac at the airport. I was so glad to be back on European soil. Yes, India was a challenging and wonderful but challenging experience in every way for me. I do hope you appreciate I'm taking us on a brand new path. I'm a bit breathless because it's a little uphill and I'm talking at the same time. But this is new to both of us. So when I got back to Lanzarote, I'd really done half a job. I'd lost myself but not found myself. And so I sort of, with my tail between my legs, really. Of course, I had my excuses when I left Lanzarote. Came back to Sheffield. Peter kindly provided a wooden pallet bed in a workshop where I started making tin amps. That was my next project. Bless him. And gradually I got to a point where I was making and selling tin amps, which are portable speakers in 2-ounce tobacco tins like Golden Virginia and St Bruno, and others I had designed and made in China. And I sold them all over Europe and the UK to shops like Selfridges, and the Conran shop. And I really enjoyed that, but I enjoyed the creative design side more than the selling side. And I didn't really sell enough for it to be viable. And after 5 years, I'd say it's dormant still. You see, I'm still holding on to it. Anyway, I digress. I've come back in a big circle. I know where we are now. Here we are. That's a lovely part of the woods. So I then set about, I suppose, in retrospect, finding myself. I'm writing this book, Mistaken Identity, subtitled Why You Are Not Who You Think You Are, which is supposed to be a provocative and enticing subtitle. And a little digression, because for the first time in a year, there are cows in the field and they're interested in you. Yes, I know, some young heifers as well. Look at them in the sunshine. They are lovely animals, aren't they, really? I once hitchhiked from Liverpool when I was 17. I hitchhiked all the way from Liverpool to Lee Abbey, a Christian community in Devon, actually in just 2 lifts. It was quite extraordinary. Good luck on the roadside, all the way to the North Devon coast, where I cleaned out cow shit from the Shipham for a week, so that they could relay a concrete floor, I seem to remember. I get on very well with cows. Docile creatures like me, kindred spirits. So, if as a general rule, we are living a mistaken identity, what's the true you? What are we on about here? Well, I've alluded to it, first of all, by saying that when you live referentially, in other words, by the standards or measures or cultural memes of the world, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that you can sort of misplace your true identity. And part of that is finding your purpose or meaning, which is entirely up to you. I wrote a book about it, Future Perfect, Creating the Life You Want, and I wrote it before I knew how to do it. I actually had to read my own book to find out how to do it, and I followed my own words, and amazingly I did create the life I wanted. And here we are, tiny house in the Derbyshire Dales, right, making videos and writing another book. Just unbelievable. Yes, you can create the life you want, but that's only, shall we say, the outer costume of a life. Really, coming home to rest for me is about the inner life. You know what I'm talking about. The things that really matter. And that brought me to Bakewell and meditating with John for 7 years now. And what is this other you? Sounds schizophrenic, really, but I would say it's the outer show person, the show pony that you are, that you display to the world, that we mistake for the authentic self. And But the promise of, it seems to me, every spiritual tradition, certainly the mystic wing of every spiritual tradition, is to call time on this sort of imposter, let's say, masquerading as you, until you see through it and realise that this separate little me is just a construct of the mind, and beyond that you are quite simply the knowing of it, as Rupert Spira likes to say. Pure knowing, which is the only thing we can be sure of, really. It's worth exploring that verse from Psalm, I think it's Psalm 16, no, Psalm 42. I'll have to look that up and put it in the description, which I use every day in my meditation. Be still and know that I am God. And there are two halves of the orange that come together there. There's the being and the knowing. And just recently I've put them together, a sort of hybrid orange. Well, no, it's not a hybrid, because that indicates two different components, but just one. And I started calling it beknowing. So that's hot off the press. Beknowing that you are none other than, let's say, the source of knowing, and there is no separation. And so it's been a while, but it's a process, a journey, of course, overused word, but of coming home to your true self, I would say, or closer to your true self. Coming to rest in a tiny house. Catch you later.